So good morning, everybody, and or afternoon or evening, depending on where you're joining us from. Welcome. I'm Jan Jeremias, one of your hosts today. Uh, Most of you know me, but just in case you are listening to the recording, I'm an integrative health and wellness coach and author who works with people and their pets to help them to stay healthy, overcome health challenges, and live healthier lives. And today, I'm very excited, as always, to be joined on stage with my co-host, more than a co-host, Mary Jane, but dear collaborator and a truly amazing friend, the very kind Mary Jane McQueen. So, Mary Jane, I'll let you further introduce yourself.
Continue to wax lyrical like you, Jen.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, good day, everyone, and welcome as always to this space. Yes, I think everybody here knows, but for the purposes of recording, I am Mary Jane or MJ, as I'm known in some social circles. And I'm the founder of MJ McQueen Creative Studio, where I help entrepreneurs to step into their light and share their gifts authentically. It is my honor and privilege to work with them to co-create something that's beautiful, that supports their mission and vision, and helps them to get that out into the world. And as always, I'm joined here with Jan, um, yes, who is indeed more than just a co-host, as we were joking as we were coming on, um, a friend and collaborator, and who continues amongst everything to shine brightly. And I honor that in her. And welcome to the space.
Okay, great. So, did you want to share our poem?
Uh, yes, Jan, I will share the poem. Still to be determined what word I will put in place.
Right, 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 right.
So we have this really great poem today. It's called Trust in Yourself, and it's by Sarah L. Harvey. And I'll give you a little hint. There might be a small, you know, slightly offensive word in there. Hopefully nobody gets too offended in this space. We were joking about that as we were coming on. I'm like, oh yeah, first thing in the morning, yay. So, Trust in Yourself by Sarah L. Harvey. Thoughts race. Am I good enough? Did I do that right? What do they think of me? Do they like me? Did I fuck it up? A run-on sentence. 1,000 questions looping through my mind equals exhaustion distilled in 5 words. I forget my own power. Trust, say my legs and hips. They are so far from my brain. They are steeped in something closer to the earth, grounded in the beauty of life. They know juicy bites of pleasure and an ease that seems so out of reach at times. Trust yourself, they say. Easier said than done. Yes, but I sip on it like a fine whiskey. It burns a little that settles in my belly like honey. Trust who you are. Trust what you know. Trust the thing that flows through you like goosebumps in the quiet moments when no one is looking, and impressing them is the farthest thing from your mind. It just feels so real, effortless, being. It doesn't happen overnight, but you walk slowly in the rivers of your truth. You begin to feel the essence of you in color and sadness and joy, coursing through your veins and perfect and so alive. You remember the wisdom inside. It never left.
Love that poem. So welcome, everyone. We welcome you with open hearts this morning. We welcome you into this space where you don't have to be anything other than who you are right now. A space where you can soften, breathe, and simply be. A space where trust, true trust, is not something you must earn, but something you're invited to remember. The word trust comes from the Old Norse trieste or tresta, meaning to rely on, to make strong and safe. Isn't that beautiful? To trust at its root is to make strong and safe, not just ourselves, but one another. In this space today, we hope you feel just that strength in your softness, safety in your stillness. Trust once also meant to entertain a lively hope. So together, we're not only returning to ourselves, but to the possibility that lives in every breath, to the knowing that even in uncertainty, something within us is steady and wise. So today, we invite you to relax into the sacred rhythm of that inner knowing, to trust that you are held, to trust that you are enough, to trust that this moment right here, right now, is enough. We're so grateful you've chosen to be here, whether you're here to share, to receive, to reflect, or to just rest. Your presence brings something vital into our shared circle. So together, let's take a grounding breath. Inhaling strength and exhaling everything that no longer needs to be carried. Welcome home. And let's begin.
Such a beautiful reflection, Jan. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, it's such an interesting topic that of it's that sacred trust, the inner wisdom. Um, some days that seems a lot easier to do than others. But it's a really important thing I find. Um, is leaning in a little bit more to that. The year or so ago, my action word for the year was trust, and before that, it was belief. So it's just really a really important a topic for sure of listening to those intuitive nudges, those things that poke at us to remind us that we everything that we need is right here and right now.
Absolutely. There's some element that, as we were preparing for this week that kept on coming to my mind, and that is to practice it. Like we practice anything, is to almost dip your toe in and play, play with trust and play with trusting yourself, and then sitting back to see what happens. But I feel like it's like anything. We have to test the waters. We have to play with it a little. We have to kind of dive in or even like dip in and see what it feels like, in those moments when we question, can we trust ourselves? And can we teach ourselves to trust ourselves? Can we practice that so it becomes something that's so much more obtainable and so much more present in our lives? And so I think that idea of constantly playing with it and then sitting back to reflect on what happened to me is this kind of vital space to cultivate and to nurture this idea or this feeling of trust. And I think that, most of us in the space know that, we tend to be pulled out and society tends us to like think that we don't know anything. And then, depending on how we were brought up and what kind got driven home at that in those formative years of like sort of the, we would feel a certain way and then we would be questioned for those feelings, sort of like downgrading that experience, causing us not to trust ourselves, having us question ourselves and the way we felt and the way we thought. And then having to then, like you said, Mary Jane, remember what it was like, remember those, how to trust ourselves,
Well, absolutely. That's for sure. I mean, the common challenge that we face is that we often we're very good at meeting our own needs. Sometimes looking for external validation. And really, as we were researching and doing some things to prepare for this, it was just like it's like the common thread was like recognizing that it's a form of self-abandonment and how, we really need to return to that feeling of intuition or whatever you want to phrase it as, um, even sometimes when it's uncomfortable because it may not be externally validated by somebody else. And it's learning to know that inner wisdom that we don't need that to move forward. So,
Yeah, and I can't wait to hear from Seamus. But one of the things I think was driven home this week for me is it's so much more than beyond like intuition. It
mm,
was this feeling of like, I think of intuition as being like, oh my gosh, I have this strong feeling about something and I don't really need to explain it or whatever. And I get that. But there's also this feeling of just in everyday decisions, whether we constantly live in this space of second guessing ourselves, of not sort of listening to our true wants and needs. And that's not even to me like intuition, that's just knowing yourself. And how we tend to live in a space where we're constantly in this constant debate in our head of like, should I do this or should I do that? And we don't really ask ourselves those vital questions of like, okay, what do I really want from this? What do I really want and what are my needs? I'm Seamus.
Yeah, thanks, John. I already had the chance actually to speak with Jason this morning. So Jason was up very early, and there's so much that kind of ties into what that the theme is today that came up in our conversation. And maybe Jason, you might want to chime in later on as well. But yeah, it's amazing, like about operating outside ourselves because we don't trust ourselves, maybe, and it kind of came through the poem as well. And I kind of wrote down a few words like around, when we do are open to experiencing what it feels like to operate with that trust from inside ourselves. Jason had a lovely little process we described at the end of our call about the work we do that is the foundation for, creating that trust beginning with ourselves that sets up the foundation how we better encourage and show up for others and invite others to operate from a similar foundation because so often we're operating in a space outside ourselves, showing up like in this one of the words I wrote down here, with an assumed identity that dishonors actually who we truly are, what we care about, and what we truly trust because we discount ourselves on the back of doubting ourselves because we're afraid of what other people will think about what we truly care and do and show up. And again, that's back to the basics of trust, I think. So, for me, like this space of it's like comparing the space of permanence, like this space of comfort, and it's a permanent space of it's so secure, it's so sound, it's so permanent. This space of operating from this space of inner knowing that there's great comfort in that, and we kind of dishonored that by showing up outside in the space of the shallowness, I guess, versus the depth of operating with complete trust in yourself, honoring your own true intuition, your own true view of what just feels right without kind of second guessing yourself or discounting your own value because you're afraid, or your own view because you're afraid of what other people will think, and you're not necessarily prepared to take a stand for your own view, and you kind of submit maybe to the views of others because that you're not allowing yourself to experience the security of the permanence of that um inner platform we all possess, what somehow we don't allow ourselves to operate from. So again, it's kind of like honing into our own wisdom, experiencing the comfort of that, operating from our true identity versus the assumed identity, which is very transient in nature. So when we're operating outside ourselves, it's a very transient, shallow experience compared to when we're operating and truly trusting the inner knowing, and how we transmit when we operate from that space versus how we operate when we're disconnected from our true identity and what we truly care about, when we're operating from a space where we just say things because we feel it's the safe thing to say type of thing. And when you begin to kind of check in on that, you really allow yourself the comfort and the liberation. I can share what I truly care about versus having to be careful how it's, you know, how and what I say, basically, So again, it's amazing how so much of what you've spoken about has come up through, what Jason and I spoke about. And I see Jason has got his hand raised as well around maybe, building on the power of how the power of honoring ourselves and honoring others and the magic that happens when you can achieve that balance, I suppose, and trust yourself and trust the other person or the situation that you're in, and allow, operate from that space that allows mutual respect, I suppose, and honoring, from that space of trust, beginning with yourself.
Thank you so much, Seamus. And one of the things you said, and I read throughout the week and just really resonated with me is if you don't trust yourself, there's no room for trust in relationships. And I think that was, it's something that like, I mean, like I knew, but when I read the words, I was like, oh my gosh, like it just was like this sort of like aha moment of that is just so true. Like, how can we expect to cultivate trusting relationships if we have no trust in the primary relationship, and that's the relationship with ourselves? And so you reiterated that, Seamus, so beautifully and just shared about, cultivating that connection so that you can come and show up, you know, from that trust of yourself. Jason, I'm looking forward to it now that I got primed by Seamus.
Yeah, and then you even primed me even more. You use the word cultivate. Seamus and I were talking, me personally, I spend a lot of time in the leadership development space, helping young managers of people leaders, learning how to connect with others, communicate with others, collaborate with others, and then cultivate the relationship, like those kind of four pillars, if you will. And Seamus and I were talking about uh, like first of all, connecting, right? Just seeing somebody authentically. Uh, Communication is more about listening than it is about speaking. Collaboration is more about supporting each other, supporting others from a mutual goal aspect, and then cultivate, like, how do we maintain this and continue it? And what came up for Seamus and I this morning on our call was that leadership really is self first before others. And so if you take that same framework, how do I connect with myself? No judgment. How do I communicate with myself? Listening, right, to the intuition piece that kind of we've been talking about, like the heart of it. How do I collaborate with myself? Like support myself? And then how do I cultivate? Like, what are the things that I need to lean into? And we also something that was, I think, relevant to this conversation. I've known a couple of people to get into different spaces recently with the human design and soul planning, and they're similar in the essence that it's about who we were created to be when we showed up in this world. In soul planning specifically is, it highlights your gifts, but it also highlights, like, all these insecurities came up for me. And it's like, what is the story I've been telling myself? And then that goes back to the self-leadership piece, right? Connect, communicate, collaborate, cultivate. What's the story I've been telling myself? And how do I rewrite that story? And it's based on uh fear of things that don't really exist. Like, I'm afraid of things that other people could care less about me in that aspect, right? And that's those stories that I tell myself are what hold me back and prevent me from showing up authentically of who I was created to be, the things that are in my core, in my soul. And it was just a very beautiful, Seamus and I connect once a month, and it just happens to be on Friday, every fourth Friday before this call. And it was just a wonderful conversation about using those same tools with yourself first, before you can do that with others. Um, so yeah, thank you, Seamus, for bringing that up, and Mary Jane and Jan for leading this discussion. It's just wonderful.
I really loved what you had to say, Jason. It's really true. It's like eh, that inner knowing, that trust. It's really important to treat that self-trust like we do any other relationship, or at least hopefully the positive ones. That we treat them with care, honesty, and consistency. It's very important because only by like being honest with ourselves and treating ourselves with um kindness, this is how we get to show up more authentically in the world in the way that we perhaps were designed or purposed to be. And just leaning into that thing. And so it's just I really value the insights both from Seamus and you, Jason, that's, as we know, we're all works in progress. And so, but it's just learning to self-reflect, but with a lens of kindness, empathy, and compassion, because that's what rules the world, or that's what should rule the world, and that's what I am radiating out into the world, hopefully.
You are. Um, no, I also loved everything that's been shared so far. And there was this, and I think it is, it's this feeling with me of, you know, never being, it never ending. Like there's always this constant, um, there's constant things that are maybe I'm remembering that I knew, but this feeling of just knowing it on a deeper level, or having it be almost nuanced, where I feel like, oh, okay, I knew that, but all of a sudden it becomes so much more apparent to myself by life circumstances, because it shows me what still has yet to be transformed or healed in some way, so that I can embody it on a deeper level. And I think that's just, through the experiences and situations that in our lives that sometimes repeat themselves or sometimes happen. And then all of a sudden you're reminded, or you have to remember, or you relearn that which you already know on a different and a deeper level. And I think one of those things is this idea of trust. I think because we have situations in our lives which all of a sudden cause us to question that trust in ourselves. We have an experience you know, where we thought we knew someone, and we get into a friendship or a relationship or collaboration, then all of a sudden, it disintegrates. And it's kind of like you trusted yourself, or you thought you knew what it was and that it wasn't. And then all of a sudden you go through and you question, and you have to kind of reaffirm that, which is all the things we talk about. And you have to sit with all the feelings that come up and all the fears or whatever it is, the hurt, the disappointment. And then all of a sudden you start to cultivate that trust again. And then something else happens. And again, it happens. And it's just this constant, evolution of life, of yourself. And to me, it is a lifelong journey. Like it never ends. Maybe if you reach enlightenment, it does, if you believe in enlightenment.
I think, yeah, as you described that, John, I think that's the whole process, really. Like myself and Jason talked about this morning, as we had before. I think around the whole process of noticing and of space and of getting curious and really allowing yourself the comfort, really, of connecting with and inquiring with anger, frustration, disappointment, loss of trust, like an action that someone has done that you feel betrayed, whatever the emotion, basically. It's the ability to be able to actually notice I am noticing that, like as Susan David often speaks about, that I'm not angry. I'm angry. I'm frustrated. You're not angry, frustrated. You're noticing that you're angry. You're noticing that you're frustrated, and it's a great way of, with the breath maybe to be able to detach from the emotion, to kind of create a channel for yourself to make sense of, whatever that emotion is, whether it's betrayal in the case of trust, maybe, or anger or frustration or whatever. But that simple process of I am noticing that, which is, the immediate space, buying yourself some time to not react in a way that doesn't serve you or the other person. I am noticing that I feel betrayed. It'd be so easy to point the finger and get angry and say you B or you effer or whatever, And but with that space, we have the ability to choose. And this is what Viktor Frankl talks about. And I think that's the opportunity, when we in that heat of the moment of trusting someone and then, realizing, oh, there's doubt around that. How we process that, I think, is an opportunity. And that's what Shirzad talks about in PQ as well, is about what looks like a terrible situation. Actually, when we create this space, it turns into a fantastic opportunity. And the sooner we can kind of step into the opportunity, the better we're able to actually reproduce that in every situation like that happens subsequently. You know what I mean? So that's kind of what's coming to mind as you described that around the loss of something, like the emotion, but the opportunity that comes with that when we create the space to kind of get curious with it and understand it and process it, I guess.
Absolutely. And I think if we do take the time, I always speak from my personal experience. And so some of you know the past few weeks, I've had a number of physical stuff going on. And as I was immobile and kind of couldn't move very easily, um, I've been sitting with, and all of a sudden, I think so many of the things that I've been thinking about, which are still there, but just kind of got redirected into what's important. And all of a sudden, I got to see what was truly important and what I have versus what I don't have. And so it allowed me the opportunity in the space to be able to sit back and sit there and say, okay, like, the people in my life, the fact that I live in this beautiful place, and yes, I may not be mobile, but I get to look out at this unbelievable scene each day. I mean, it's gorgeous, and how blessed that is. And to get me out of that kind of very narrow way of looking things that I had been stuck in. And so sometimes we do need those opportunities to literally, our theme within the past few weeks was bloom where you're planted. Well, I had to bloom where I was planted, literally, since I wasn't going anywhere, and had to, and so is to allow that to happen. But so much of the time we get distracted out of those things. We get pulled away and we think other things are more important than reflecting back. And I do love that idea of I'm noticing that. The other one that I always like is which I think is a Thich Nhat Hanh phrase, which is I'm noticing that this feeling, to say that the feeling is within me, but that you are not the feeling. Like I'm not angry. The feeling of anger is within me, or the feeling of whatever, jealousy or resentment or whatever. And so I think that that phrase always helped me, I know, and some of my clients, because you realize that that feeling is not all that you are. And when it's only one part of you, it becomes a little bit more, I want to say manageable, or just you're able to kind of sit with it a little bit because it's not as overwhelming and all encompassing. Thank you, Austin. I'm becoming aware.
Yeah, and I think that it's true also that when you realize the power of trust, it kind of works in the opposite way. You've discounted the trust and you're noticing I'm not trusting myself. And when you kind of realize that, like you're noticing you're angry, frustrated, like let's say you're noticing an emotion that's not serving you, you can turn that into like noticing, well, I'm not really saying what I want to say here. And I'm noticing I'm not ready or, prepared to be able to take a stand for what I truly care about. And when you have the courage to kind of take a stand outside yourself for something you feel within yourself, that can be so empowering and liberating as well. And I think that's part of trust, that you finally, you've held on, you feel you couldn't say something that you want to say, that you're feeling inside. And I think that's an element of honoring, that inner knowing, and having the courage to express something that you felt maybe you couldn't feel you could express before, from that place of trust, and inner knowing. But when you do that once or twice or three times, it becomes easier to do, because then you can see the value and the gift that it is actually to honor what you truly care about from your inside out. So to honor that initially inside yourself, which is great, but then to actually take the extra step of expressing that view. And that's foundation building as well, because it kind of really enhances your ability to kind of honor yourself, and to realize that your perspective or your view, your opinion, what you care about is a gift to others as well, So there's no downside to this, really. You know what I mean? When you think there's so much insecurity and, oh, I couldn't possibly say that because, people will laugh, or whatever judgment we tell ourselves that, it's not good enough. But when you actually have the courage to do it, there's an immediate payback, like, oh God, yeah. And it's a gift, actually. You know what I mean? And I think that's a game changer. That, for me personally, was a game changer when I realized my opinion is a gift rather than something that's a weakness.
No, I mean, I love that. Yes, and it does take great courage, Jason. And I thought about that as Seamus was talking about it also, because I think there are circumstances where you are, let's say you do show up and you do share something and people don't respond maybe in a way that you thought was. So two things, I've had that happen. And then you have to sit back and say, it's like they're questioning, maybe I said too much, or maybe I shouldn't have said that. But then also realize that the courage it took, and that was much more about them than it was about you and you sharing it. It was their uncomfortableness, or in being able to sort of like, be open enough to receive what you said, versus what it was you actually shared.
Yeah, that's a really valid point. And I just love the whole concept of just, taking that moment, creating that pause for yourself. And I don't, when Seamus was speaking, I was just thinking, it was like, when things maybe don't go as you plan, or maybe you feel like maybe you mess something up a little bit, is really to get rid of the judgment. I'm not saying not to be responsible for the things, your actions and things, but to get rid of that judgment that we tend to some we have a tendency to reside in. And as our friend Darlene always loves to talk about, is get curious about why the situation it has occurred, and reflect on it, but always stay kind. Stay kind to yourself.
Absolutely. And I noticed that Seamus put in notice the judgment, and that's where I've been lately. And that was something that was my, like, over the last few weeks, that I am really compassionate and kind in not trying to judge others. I think it's something I really sort of live by in everyday things. Like, I've cultivated this feeling of very sort of non-judgment, but how quick I am to judge myself and to hold myself to this standard, which is godlike. I mean, I'm not using that in sort of like, but sort of this superhuman quality, and how, and then all of a sudden seeing that for so much, because I was like in a meeting and we're all talking about, and everybody's talking about judging others. And I was thinking, I really don't do that. Like, I really go in with an open heart and an open mind to almost, but how quickly I am to just hold myself to this standard, which, is superhuman or robotic almost, because, something that doesn't get phased and doesn't feel and whatever, and navigate the world through that, which is, you can't do. Just not able. You're not able.
It is amazing, isn't it, how sometimes we, or often for some of us, set these standards that are so high for ourselves that we would never ever expect anybody in our immediate circle and those that we love and care about and who support us in community. We would never ever expect them to reach those kind of standards, but somehow when we um comes to ourselves and we we often hold these standards so high that it's impossible. If we don't expect other people to reach them, why on earth would we ever expect ourselves um to reach them as well? Because we're all humans, we're all learning as we go along this beautiful path and journey called life. So I see Al's had his hand raised, so I'm wondering what pearl of wisdom he's bringing today.
Yeah,
Yeah, I got
I'm waiting for the acronym.
yeah, the acronym for this week, because the topic is secret trust and inner wisdom. So the secret comes from our experience of every day. Secret stands for simply a chapter read each day. It means every day when we're reading, I mean, it's like experience. When we're reading, it's like a chapter of our life that's been written on a book each day. So that's why it's called simply a chapter read each day. And the word wisdom actually comes from a book by this lady called Elisha T. Cordua, Living in His Wisdom. It's a book. So the wisdom's acronym stands for Walking in the Light of God. The I stands for Inspiring Others Through the Holy Spirit. S stands for Seeking and Serving the Savior. D is Doing the Will of the Father. O is Obeying the heavenly vision. And M is Maintaining Fellowship and Faithfulness. So this one, the wisdom does not come from me. So basically, yeah, I would say that every day as we cross the path, there's a lot of curiosity from us. That's how we always keep learning and never be complacent. So it's from a comfort to a curiosity, every day, as what we spoke about, and that's how we develop our inner wisdom. Yep, thank you.
Jan, did you forget to unmute yourself?
No, I was just typing because I
Oh,
love from comfort to curiosity. And that phrase, maybe the two C's, it was like from comfort to curiosity. And the other word was complacent. So, and so I think that um, we can almost lull ourselves into complacency or this feeling of it's always like I talk about with when I speak to people about their physical issues, it almost becomes this feeling of like they're so used to being in pain on a certain level, they don't know what it's like, and it becomes like the norm. And so I think people live in this kind of perceived what they feel like is their normal kind of existence. And then they almost, it's like they've been lulled into this space of not trying to go like to get curious. And I love that one of my favorite words, Al, is sacred. Um, yeah, I think it's just, I don't know, something about that word really resonates with me. And that's where it actually comes from, the word from actually the sacrum, which is part of the back of your, part of your body, is the most sacred part of the body. So the sacral chakra, sacred. So I guess maybe we'll go and we'll just ask, like, we talked about getting quiet, but any other um sort of tips or guides to um cultivating that trust? I'm gonna be open to, love to hear what other people kind of what they do on a daily and I think, like I said, it is this kind of thing you can nurture and cultivate within yourself, is that really exploring, the different aspects of trusting yourself. Oh, Austin, please.
Yes, so to contribute to this topic we're on, I do have one way that I guess Spirit has been pushing me to share, and I'm not sure why. I've mentioned it before, but in the mornings, I often will do what I have now mutated into my own version of what we're talking about, this trust. And it's a deep way of doing introspection where and actually, today's video that I made was actually literally all about how this has transgressed and been transmuted and reframed and all the things that we are actually talking about here this morning. That is it. And I call it awareness documentation, where I record myself talking to myself. And it began with just an expanded version of, say, journaling or dialogue that I was already having anyway. I followed someone's structure, which in the video I made, I kind of talk about how I've changed that. But it's this what we're talking about here. And I think the most important, or the nugget to share with this is I was already doing all the things. But when I did record it and was able to play it back, there's a certain accountability that helped the introspection. But the nugget here is just to start. If with anything you're doing, but certainly the trusting yourself, even in other areas of my life with the mental health paradigms, I really had to not only accept and surrender, but trust that I'm the one making those changes. So for anybody who, is wondering, well, what's the structure that's working for me? Is it this journal? Is it this meditation? Is it that all of them require one thing and the same, which is just to start. So for me, in my personal journey, one of the many things that I found really lit me up in terms of introspection, and that's very surface level understanding there, was recording myself talking to myself. It's like a personal diary, if you will, if that helps understand. But I just wanted to share that nugget. Just start, just start, just start.
Love that, Austin, and you're right. Just start. And I love the idea of recording, and we've, I think, chatted about this. There's something about hearing it in your own voice versus writing it down that takes it to a new level. I mean, we always talk about, Mary Jane, in our workshops, like that sort of thing, pen to paper kind of thing, which I do think there is something hard, like there is a neurological pathway that's created when you actually write it, but there's also something when you hear it and when you speak it in your own voice versus listening to someone else say it. There's a further, the word, like, I guess, like ownership of it when you hear yourself saying it. So I absolutely love that. And Jason?
So there must be a frequency that we're all on right now. Because it keeps evolving for me. Austin was talking about, and you just elaborated on this, Jan, about there's this speaking, right? Like hearing your own voice. So somebody once said to me, practice makes perfect, right? Like we hear this all of our lives, practice makes perfect. And practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes permanent. And the question we should ask ourselves is, what are we practicing? And the thing that I know about the learning process, like when we think about learning and development, is that it's broken up into this 10, 20, 70 kind of paradigm, right? 10% of our learning is formal, 20% of our learning is exposure, which would be formal would be going to a presentation or watching a video online. Like we resonate with it, but then as time passes, we forget more and more and more and more of what we saw or what we learned. And the exposure piece is the same way. It's you learn a little bit more by seeing it modeled, but as time passes, you forget every day a little bit more. And the 70% of our learning process is experience. And we when we go through the motions, we remember that. There's this remembrance that's happening. And so as Austin's talking about recording his this voice, his in his own words, so if we think about things on an energetic level, when we uh, think about it, it's energy that's processing in our brain. Sometimes we write it down, and that's also energy. But when we speak it, our vocal cords, like our voice is literally energy, right? Like singers and performers and like the opera, like it's an instrument, and we experience that. And so when we say it in our own words, we are experiencing it, and it becomes even like those are the things we remember. And so I love that Austin's recording his affirmations and playing them back to himself or his own thoughts, because that is the remembrance. That's the learning process. And so we're rewriting our learning, right? Instead of what we were to I also know that in order to learn something new, you have to unlearn what you already knew, right? So it's this process of learning something new, but you have to make space for that because we only have so much capacity. So we have to unlearn what we thought we knew and experience to learn and rewrite our story. And so sounds simple. Simple and easy are not the same thing. But if we can just start, right? Just practice, right? Like everybody's did something for the very first time. And, I remember driving my car on the freeway for the first time. I mean, I was white knuckling it. The, you know, cars are passing at 70 miles an hour. I was 16, they're cutting in front of me, they're honking, like all this chaos is going on. And I'm like nerve-wracked. And here I am, 16 years old to 50 years old, and the outside conditions haven't changed, but I drive through traffic and no problem. It's because I've practiced it every day. The conditions outside of me have not changed. Inside of me, they have, because I've learned how to manage stress and deal with things and not be affected by the outside noise. That's people are still going 70, they're still honking, they're still cutting in line, right? And then I actually get to choose, do I get to slow down, let somebody in, preventing the honking, right? That's where the kindness and compassion and the care comes from. But I have to have it with myself and then extend it to others. And so just these are the things that we know. And so it's just taking that step, having the courage. And Austin is talking about recording his own voice. We all have somebody in our life that we trust. And maybe it's starting that conversation, like with this group, right? This is a psychologically safe environment for us to have this dialogue. And maybe it's time to have the dialogue of, with somebody, maybe it's not on a recording, but maybe it's one-on-one with somebody, just having that dialogue about those, rewriting our own story and taking those steps and practicing it, just starting somewhere, right? It's going to be messy. It's going to be complex. It's like, it's going to be all over the place. But just starting it. I love that. Just starting. And thank you.
Thank you, Jason, and thank you, Austin. Yeah, just starting. And I think that it's a really good point, Jason. It's like, here we are, we're in this really beautiful space that Mary and Jay and I have worked, worked to cultivate. And really, I'm so overjoyed by all of you being here. But it's really, can we take it? In yoga, we always say, can we take our practice off the mat and take it into the world? And that's really, And I always wondered how that was done, when I first started, like, what does that mean? And so much of that means, if I'm better with myself, I'm better with all the people that I'm around, all the people that encounter me, that I interact with. And in that way, it ripples out. And that's how, we always took it. I think I don't, and as time goes on, I mean, it's been a long time, 25 years or 24 years I've been practicing. That has evolved in a lot of different ways. And I think I see the impact in a lot of different ways, negative and positive. I think we all see examples of how we didn't navigate well and what happened and what were the repercussions, not only for ourselves, but for other people or for other things in our lives. And then we also have seen the reverse. When we show up, as we are, and what is reflected back because of that.
Such amazing insights. I've been just really soaking in all of the nuggets and things that everybody's been sharing. But yeah, you know, it's it is just really a really important thing to um, trust that that you know when you're taking the time to pause and to listen both to yourself and sometimes to those that you actually trust around you that are supportive in your community. It's a beautiful thing, and it's just it's wonderful to be able to share space, sacred space, shall we say, with those here that are sharing their pearls of wisdom. Um, it's just it's such a beautiful experience. I really enjoy and love these conversations.
Absolutely. Ditto, Mary Jane. So, I think we'll move into the meditation right now. So, invite you to begin by finding a comfortable seat or a posture that you find comfortable. Let your eyes soften or close if it feels safe to do so. Begin by bringing your attention inward. Feel the support beneath you. Let it hold you. Let your breath be natural as you gently bring your awareness to your body. Notice any tension you might be holding without needing to change anything. Simply notice and allow. With each breath, imagine yourself arriving into this moment, into your body, into the presence of your own company. Feel the rhythm of your breath, noticing the inhale and the exhale. Letting the breath be an anchor, an offering of steadiness. You don't need to fix or prove. You simply get to be. Now gently bring the awareness to the center of your chest, your heart space, the place where you hold feelings, knowing, memory. Feel free to place a hand on your heart, just as a gesture of connection, as a deeper sensation of awareness. And ask inwardly with kindness, what does it mean to trust myself? And just listen. No need to answer. Just create a space to receive. What does it mean to trust myself? Maybe you feel resistance. Maybe you feel openness. All of it's welcome. Self-trust grows not through perfection, but through showing up with honesty. Let yourself remember a moment when you honored a decision, when you listened inwardly, when you followed a quiet knowing. It could be a small choice or a big one. Let yourself feel that moment of alignment. And say silently to yourself, I am learning to trust myself. I honor my needs, my voice, and my choices. I am safe within myself. If it feels true for you, repeat this line gently, inwardly. I am rebuilding the relationship with myself with consistency, honesty, and kindness. It wasn't that I didn't relate to self-love. It was that I hadn't built enough trust in myself to feel it. Let these words land in your heart. Let it remind you trust and love are connected. Begin to return now. Feel free to wiggle fingers and toes. Take a fuller breath in and a long breath out. Feel the steadiness beneath you once more. And when you're ready, feel free to open your eyes if they are closed, to lift your gaze. Let's take one last deep breath together. Inhale and exhale. Trust. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We really are honored and so blessed to have you all share this space with us and these beautiful conversations. Feel free to connect with us during the week. We'd love to have a conversation about this or something else. Our next workshop together, Mary Jane and I, is June 28th at 2 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. That's online. So feel free to join. If you check out our LinkedIn pages or our group, it's, we have quite a number of postings and it's somewhere in there. And also, lastly, for all of you in the US, outside the US, a very, very happy Father's Day to all who celebrate and celebrate that masculine kind of divine energy, whether you're a father or not. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a blessed weekend. Thank you for joining us as always and sharing this space with us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, guys.